Welcome back to Gale Force Wins Season 4.
I'm Alan Dale at Gale Force Winds. With me as always, my good buddy from the east end of St. John's, Jerry Carew. Certainly happy to be here on location in St. John's in the beautiful and historic Battery. Jerry, excited about today's conversation?
Well, you know that I've talked about Don for a good bit now, and we've been trying to nail down our schedules for a couple of years. And we've been in Halifax, Alan, you and I, probably 20 times. You weren't there, we were there. And when we found out you were going to be in St. John's, we certainly had to make sure that we could get and sit with you. Again, as Alan said, this is east. This is almost as east as you can get. You can't see it in the video. That's St. John's there, but the Narrows is right over there. We're in the Battery, Don, is where we are. So take it away, Al.
Don, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, great. Thanks, folks, for having me here. So Don Bureaux, I have the honor of being the president of the Nova Scotia Community College and have known Jerry for many, many years. And Alan, it's great to meet you. And yeah, the past couple of years, my goodness, we were like ships passing in the night, with no pun intended. So it's so great to be here and looking forward to our chat. So thank you.
As a ship maneuvers out there right behind us, right?
Don, tell us a little bit about your journey. Where did you grow up? Where did it all start?
Yeah, so I grew up in Riverview, New Brunswick. I'm a maritimer, an Atlantic Canadian at heart. But you know, I was an afterthought. I always joke my parents raised four young children in Nova Scotia. My dad worked with the railway back in the 50s and 60s. In the late 60s, the railway consolidated to Moncton, New Brunswick. And 8 years after they were done having children, I came along and had just a great childhood. In some ways, an only child. My older siblings were gone by the time I could remember.
How many siblings was that, did you say?
So four.
And you're the fifth?
I'm the youngest of five, yeah, with 14 or 15 years difference between myself and the oldest. So Dad worked for the railway. Mom provided a great home life for us. A great mom, great dad, and had just a wonderful upbringing. Yeah.
And what was it like in New Brunswick back in the day there, growing up?
Boy, you know, it was interesting. There were some dark days in the 70s and 80s in Moncton. So different than it is now. It's such a cosmopolitan, vibrant city. But back then, the military base was closed. If you remember, we were a large area, the hub city, in fact, for the railway. In the 80s, the railway shops closed, which meant there were thousands of people out of work. So my teenage years were years in which I saw a lot of my friends having to move away because their parents lost their jobs.
Okay. How about yourself? Where did you go after your teenage years?
Yeah, so after high school, I ended up making the trek to Nova Scotia. And I was about 15 years old before I realized I wasn't living in Nova Scotia, because every weekend we'd go down to Nova Scotia to visit relatives. Had a lovely summer cottage in Nova Scotia, so every summer we'd be picked up on report card day and off to the cottage we'd go and come back after Labor Day. So spent a lot of my time in Nova Scotia, which is truly where my heart and soul is. Love New Brunswick, but Nova Scotia really is home for me. So I ended up going to Acadia University, studying business administration, because I had the hopes and dreams of, like most young boys in Canada, I think, of joining the RCMP.
Okay.
And I went to visit them when I was in grade 12, and they encouraged me to get an accounting background because that was the way to go. So I did that and came out of university, and they weren't accepting applications. So I ended up going into the accounting business and worked with KPMG, and then eventually became a CPA.
Okay.
Yes.
What was it about the Mounties that intrigued you back then?
Yeah, probably a couple of things, but one was my oldest brother was in the RCMP.
Okay.
And to see what he was doing in terms of his lifestyle as a Mountie, but he had this affinity for being a bit of a mentor to young people. And that struck a chord with me. He saw himself as a person who wanted to give back to the community and help young people who found themselves on the wrong side of the law but deserved a second chance.
Wow.
So that spoke to me, and it attracted me to the RCMP. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a powerful thing, right? Police officer it's one thing to sort of take off your boots in the case of a Mountie at the end of the day and end your shift, but that sounds a little deeper. That's community impact.
Yeah, he did a lot of work with troubled youth in the community and really helped them understand responsibility and sense of self and pride by teaching them how to shoot. Mm-hmm. He was an excellent marksman. He ended up working, he was on the SWAT at that time. It was SWAT, it was the ERT team, the Emergency Response Team, and then he was promoted to go to Ottawa to work on the national special ERT team. But he used his skills and his passion for that, for good.
Right.
To help primarily young men, think of a different way forward.
How much older was he?
So he's almost 15 years older than I am.
Wow.
Yes.
Big impression on you, obviously.
Jerry, a big impression. You know, a young boy seeing your older brother as an RCMP officer was a major impact on me. But you know, all four of my siblings were that much older that as a young child, they were all this bit of an inspiration to me. They were all great young people and had great careers.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
So spent a lot of time in Nova Scotia in those early years.
Yes.
Pugwash area, you say? That's
Yeah. So my father's family came to Canada as coal miners back in the early 1900s. Came not being able to speak English, no money in their pocket, a strong back and a desire to live a different life. So they
From where down?
From Belgium. They came from Belgium and also from France, and they were very skilled mining coal. And Canada, of course, was on the brink of an industrial revolution, so the mining of coal became very important to our economy. Landed in Inverness, Nova Scotia, landed at Pier 21, arrived at Pier 21, took a train to Inverness, Nova Scotia, and the first week they were there, they cut down trees and made a log cabin that became their home.
Wow.
So lived a very, very hard life. And then my dad actually ended up leaving school in grade 8. He worked in some war manufacturing facilities around the Amherst area. And then he joined the railway and spent 45 years working with the railway.
Wow.
And never complained a day. I never heard that man complain a day about having to go to work. He certainly loved it.
Yeah. Just sort of put on the hat and went to work, right?
It was a different ethic,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah. I think he was fortunate because he enjoyed the nature of his work, but he also had the responsibility of providing for a family, which allowed my mom to stay home and raise the children.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Different era.
5 kids too, right? There's a lot of work there,
Five kids,
right?
a lot of work there,
Yeah.
exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mom was not idle.
Mom was not idle. Boy, I guess she wasn't. And, you know, she was the CEO of the home, and my dad provided financially for us. So we went to Acadia, came out of Acadia, joined the accounting firm, and then pursued an educational career.
Okay.
Had anyone in your family gone to university?
Yeah, so the oldest boy, John, the RCMP officer, did. And the middle boy, Robert, went to St. F.X.
Okay.
My sister, Susan, pursued a career in the banking industry and very successful. And the boy next to me joined the railway and kind of followed the footsteps of my father.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
How did you make the leap from KPMG into the academic world?
Boy, that was a TSN turning point, Al.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure if Jerry, you've heard this story.
No.
So I was living the life as an accountant, working for an international accounting firm in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I began to really understand what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And it wasn't accounting.
Okay.
And I began to understand the true definition of a strength and a weakness. Because for the longest time, I thought a strength was something that you were good at. Mm-hmm. And I was good at accounting. Like, I was just good at it. But accounting made me weak. Mm-hmm. It drained me. It depleted me. It wasn't something I got excited about. So you'll remember this, driving across the McKay Bridge with one of the old cell phones. I had to plug it into my cigarette outlet. It came in a container or a box. Battery was the size of a cooler. Mm-hmm. So I opened up the top, put the aerial up, picked up the phone. I was stuck in traffic on the McKay Bridge, and I called a faculty member of mine who was a mentor at Acadia. He just recently passed away, God bless his soul, Walter Eisner. Middle of August, and I said, Walter, I need to make a career change. I'm just not enjoying this. And on the spot, he said, you know what? We just had a faculty member resign. We're looking for an accounting faculty member. You want to come teach? I'm there.
Wow.
So at that time, we had one child. So my wife and I and our oldest now packed up, and we moved to the Valley. And I began working at the Acadia University. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So began a career in teaching. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll never think of the McKay Bridge the same way again.
Honest to
right?
God, and I swear every time I drive over that, which is usually a few times a week, I always remember that day that I made that phone call.
Interesting.
And he allowed me, and you know, I wasn't that good at teaching. I was better at accounting than I was at teaching.
Right.
But teaching became a strength. And it's really more about appetite than aptitude.
Don, if I could pull on that string there a little bit and talk about that particular person that you called. You obviously had a lot of trust in this person as a mentor to, at this point in your life, just pick up the phone and say, I need help, like I need, that shows some vulnerability on your part, but to know that there's somebody on the other side that can really support you, never mind the uniqueness of that moment that somebody had just left, but talk to me about that part of mentorship and what that meant to you to know that you had somebody like that.
That's such a great question. Walter Eisner was a unique educator in that he educated the whole person. He was interested in us intellectually growing, but he also wanted us to grow as human beings. You know, you talk about the head, the heart, and the hands of kind of human development. He was focused on all three. And because of that, I began to have a trusting conversation with him as I went through university. And, you know, we think about what we've been through for the past 3 or 4 years as a world, and we've become more kind of socially distanced. And I think of people who are not able to form those kind of close social relationships with people that I had with that professor. So I trusted him. I was able to be vulnerable, to use your word, Alan. And he was a guy who had the ability to listen. He just listened, and he was comfortable with quiet. I'd be in his office talking to him, and for 30 seconds, no one would say a word. So based on that relationship, based on that foundation, I found great comfort in giving him a call to explain, I need to make a 90-degree turn. Yeah. Right time, right call, and I've never forgotten kind of the responsibility that I think I have now to give back to people who are facing that situation.
Yeah, that's great, right?
It's a circle, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It certainly sets you up well to do exactly that for people that will, I'm sure they call you as well. Yeah. So you start teaching there at Acadia, and again, so you make another leap from sort of that teaching role into more of an administrative role?
Well, I did, yeah. So I joined Acadia. I had a dual role. I was a faculty member, and I also worked in an entity called the Acadia Center for Small Business and Entrepreneurship. And what we were trying to do was kind of recast the approach that people were taking to be entrepreneurs. For too long, the question being asked, which we thought was the wrong question, was the question of, do you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? And we thought that was a fundamentally flawed question. We thought the proper question to ask was, what type of entrepreneur do you want to be? And that simple reframing allowed people to demystify entrepreneurship and make it more accessible. For too long, people saw some of the icons of the Canadian economy and say, I'm not that person, and therefore I can't pursue my entrepreneurial dreams. We flipped that on its head. And because of that, I think we really democratized entrepreneurship. Wow. And that became a calling for me to make transformation accessible to more people.
You know, you must have seen some amazing success stories in that time.
Unbelievable, yeah. And you know, I've often heard that entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurial spirit, is one of the most powerful kind of human instincts that we have. And all too often, I think entrepreneurs make it a bad name. There's a suggestion they're taking advantage of their fellow human being. Not the entrepreneurs that I know. They have a strong value base, they know their personal vision, and they're able to translate that into something of value to what people are looking for in society. And when you ask them, are you earning income, or are you just living your natural life? And the true entrepreneurs can't make a really great distinction there. They're just being who they are. Yeah. You know what I mean? They're just, and I think the two of you represent that. And that's why I find the two of you so inspiring. So those who can erase the line between kind of their personal self and their work self, which it goes against the kind of the common advice, like separate, actually bring those two worlds together. And if you have that kind of smooth affinity, look, market development or business development becomes not hard if you have that magical formula.
You know, you often hear terms like if you find your passion, you'll never work another day in your life.
100%. Exactly.
All of those type phrases. But it's so important to, as you say, demystify it and let people know that there's something in you. It may not look like everybody else, Just let's sort of work through and find that. That's an amazing thing that you were giving back to a lot of people, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Must have made you feel good at the moment.
You know, it did. It was one of those moments where you go home at night and you look into a mirror and you say, I've done something that matters today. You've impacted, you transformed a province kind of one person at a time.
What a great feeling.
It's a great feeling, Alan, yeah. And if you ask people to flip it, like again with entrepreneurship, just for a second, all too often people are asked to look at the world around you and figure if there's an unmet need, and then be prepared to contort yourself to meet that need. Backwards.
Yeah.
First look inward and figure out who you are, what you want to be, kind of your destiny, your character, your calling, to use Lance Secretan's framework, and then use that as the framework to find a match to an opportunity.
Right.
That's the recipe for success. Yeah.
Don, the transition into the community colleges.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Boy, that's another great question. So I'm at Acadia University working, and look, I went to Acadia, worked at Acadia, love Acadia, love Acadia. So one day I'm in Halifax, attending a conference about transformation in education, and there's a guy on stage with the name of Ray Ivany. Now Ray Ivany was really, for all intents and purposes, the first president of the Nova Scotia Community College when we moved from being an arm of government to an independent organization. One of the last colleges in the country to actually make that transition. Why? The government of the day, back in the late 1990s, I think had great foresight. A new millennium was coming our way, and we had to modernize the college system. 20 years ago, Ray Ivany, at a conference center in Halifax, was describing that transition, that evolution. And have you ever been in a group of 500 people and you think that person on stage, he's talking to me?
Yeah.
Like he's not talking, there's nobody else in this room, he's talking to me. So I went home that night and I declared I'm going to go work at the Nova Scotia Community College.
That must have went over well.
That didn't go over very well. And I applied and I got the job.
For what a job.
So it's interesting because I was returning to be an accountant. And again, accountants are wonderful. It's a great profession.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a great match for me.
So not teaching, you're applying for an accounting job.
100%.
Interesting.
And the people in my family said, okay, let me get this straight. You're taking a big pay cut. Yes, I am. At that time, at least in our world, working for a university was kind of here, and going to work with a vocational school was maybe at a different level. Yeah, that's correct. And you're going to return to a position that you don't quite you got that, like, what am I missing? And I said, there is something, again, inside that seems to be lining up properly. So I made the shift to go work at NSCC under the leadership of this person who I was so inspired with, Ray Ivany. What would you believe? About 2 months later, he announced he was leaving. He went to Acadia.
No.
To become the president of Acadia. So we went like this. But it was one of the best moves. Acadia set me up for success.
Right.
And I will always be so grateful for the opportunities that I had there. And NSCC was the next part of the journey.
Right.
And so I came in and I had that job for about 8 months as an accountant and began to be promoted. Yeah.
And so you moved through the administrative ranks of the...
I did. You'll get a kick out of this. So in Nova Scotia, we have, much like the College of the North Atlantic, we have multiple campuses around the province. You have 17, we have 13. And I moved from the accounting role to leading one of the campuses.
Okay.
So I was a principal of one of the campuses.
Which one?
King's Tech, which is down in the valley, which was right back in the neighborhood of working with Acadia.
Yeah.
Loved it. Loved that role. And then after a few years of doing that role, the vice president's role came open. So I applied for a VP role, got that job. And then the VP academic role came open, applied and got that job. And then our president of the day had her partner was in a very serious car accident, and she decided to retire quickly. So on a Wednesday morning, I'm walking into work as the vice president academic, and I was stopped in the hallway by the chair of the board, and She said, Don, can I see you for a moment? And I said, yes. I'm thinking, goodness, not good.
Yeah, right.
It's not good being stopped at the
You
front
just
door.
assumed you've done something wrong.
Okay, where's my box to pack up my goods? And she said, our president had announced that she's retiring. And I said, wow. And she decided to exit quickly. She wanted to retire quickly. I said, okay. And they said, we want you to be the acting president. And I said, my gosh. I said, wasn't expecting that. When do you need to know? They said, now.
Yeah.
Right away.
Now. So at 9 o'clock that morning, they announced that I was now the acting president of the college. Yeah.
Just like that?
Just like that. So I asked for two things. I said, can I have my old job back? And the second thing I wanted to know was, am I the president or am I kind of a caretaker? And they said, no, you're the president, and you can have your old job back, because I really enjoyed being vice president academic.
Yeah.
6 months into it, I fell in love with the job. When they put the posting note, I applied for it and competed, and I was awarded the position.
So you were interim for a little period.
I was interim for almost a year.
Wow.
Yeah, and then as I say, wasn't sure I wanted it for the first 6 months, and then the next 6 months I realized this was the job for me.
And
funny.
how long ago was that when you were appointed?
Boy, that was 2000. I was interim in 2010, appointed in 2011, so it's coming up on 15 years. Yes.
It's funny, you go in to work in the morning and you never know what's going to hit you.
You don't.
That's a little bigger thing than a normal, obviously.
Well, but it is. But it's the things that when you talk about mentorship, the importance of resiliency, the importance of being able to be ready for when that door opens or when that door closes, to figure out what's next.
Do you think your time?
So important.
Do you think your time around entrepreneurial people helped you be entrepreneurial within the
100%.
college?
Yeah, great recognition. I think the time I spent just thinking and reflecting and living, working amongst people who had that mindset. That challenge is nothing more than an opportunity with a bit of a road bump in front of it. That failure is nothing more than an opportunity to really learn and do something differently going forward. Those were deep and powerful learnings. And probably the most important learning I had was the importance of a social network. When you're in times of great opportunity or great challenge, having that Rolodex of people that you can call, Walter, on that bridge that day, or so many people since then, that is gold.
Wow. So I'm assuming that Ray, who you crossed paths with, now you're the president of the community college, he's president of Acadia. Your paths must have crossed again.
Well, they did. And talking about mentorship, he'd be in the same category as Walter Eisner.
Is that right?
Ray's a guy who is a phone call away at his offering and has been there for me in times, and vice versa. I'm very honored. Being asked one's opinion is probably one of the greatest gifts somebody can receive. So I've been very privileged to be part of his journey too, and I don't take that lightly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, a community college in Nova Scotia, a university in Nova Scotia, there is immediate collaboration between you both, right?
Alan, it's come light years, exactly. Yeah. So some would say Nova Scotia is a bit of a crowded marketplace for post-secondary institutions. We have 11 in a relatively small province. Some would look at that as a cost to the provincial kind of treasury. I think it's an asset, and our government thinks it's an asset. I think the Nova Scotian community thinks it's an asset. So if we are going to honor our promise to the million shareholders, people who live in Nova Scotia, it's incumbent upon us to collaborate, to maximize, to leverage this asset that we have in the province. So we have students going back and forth, joint programming going back and forth, joint research projects. We're just too small not to think big when it comes to the power of collaboration.
Yeah, and of course, being small makes you very agile and nimble, right? Yes. And you can work collaboratively together. So let's talk about NSCC, if we can. What's happening there at the moment? What's exciting about what's going on there?
Yeah, so what I love about it, it has been a journey that kind of represents the journey of a human being. So we were formed as an independent organization back in 1996. So what's that, 28 years ago. In many ways, we're like a 27-year-old. And if you go back in time, we were like a 5-year-old, and we were like a 3-year-old. We had to go through the stages of growth to become a modern college. Some have said, pre-1996, We thought we were doing pretty good programming, but there was a brand that we were kind of an unled, unloved, and unfunded organization. And thank goodness the political leaders realized that had to change. So over the past 27 years, it's been a journey of growth and development. And Ray Ivany always said, we have a generation, a single generation to create a modern college in the province. And to be part of that has just been a privilege for me. So as we have grown, and we've never forgotten of the core guiding principles and mandate. I used earlier the concept that for me, we tried to democratize entrepreneurship.
Right.
Well, we're using that word now. We're trying to democratize education. There was a time, excuse me, in this country, if you didn't have lots of money, if you didn't come from the right families, if you didn't have high school marks through the roof, then post-secondary was not an accessible option for you. And that's changed. Institutions of higher learning are trying to democratize, and the word is make them more accessible.
Yeah.
Improve accessibility. So that's been our continued journey, to make education accessible, to try to transform and change the narrative in families. Would you believe over 40% of our students are the first people in their family ever to go to post-secondary education?
Wow.
We're the first in their family. And what that does, it changes the narrative at the supper table, when children or siblings can see somebody in their family. So you fast forward time, we've never stood down from that accessibility, that democratization kind of mindset. And what we're trying to do now is kind of bring together what I feel are the two major movements in the world. One would be this notion of the fourth industrial revolution. I think we're smack in the middle of that right now. Mm-hmm. We've gone from the 1700s with steam, 1800s electricity, the 1900s the microchip, and now it's about the intersectionality about big data and robotics and automation, biotechnology, infotechnology, and where do those worlds come together? And for the first time in all four revolutions, Atlantic Canada can compete with the best in the world.
Yeah.
Because place now matters less. You can look what we're doing here.
Yeah.
You can reach the world anywhere in Atlantic Canada. And with that, human capital becomes one of the most important factors of production.
Right.
And I would put our human capital up against anybody in the world. So that part of the imperative. And the second part of the imperative that guides our work is the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Like really taking a really hard look at what it means to be a human being in today's world. Mm-hmm. And at times, I think we need to pay a lot of attention to that. There's a tension obviously happening in the world right now. And as educators, as entrepreneurs, as politicians, we need to figure out where do those two worlds come together. The economic imperative and the social imperative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It must be an amazing feeling and a great feeling, you know, to go to work every day, and while you're not in the classroom, you're sort of you got your steady hand on the tiller of this ship that is NSCC.
Yes.
And driving in direction, but knowing that you're going to have significant impact on people's lives, transforming people's lives and what you're doing, changing lives. Yeah. That is an amazing thing to go to work and face every day.
It is. It absolutely is. And I struggle to find the right word to describe it, to be honest with you. I use the word honor. It's a privilege. It truly is. To be invited into a learner's life for a year or two, or to allow them to be vulnerable and trusting enough is something truly special. Every year we will graduate about 5,000 individuals who walk across the stage, and I get to shake the hand of every one of those 5,000 graduates. And I get to complete, much to their chagrin, a 12-second exit interview with 5,000 people. And in that 12 or 15 seconds, I have them on stage, shaking their hand, giving them their credential. I'll ask them questions about how have you changed? What's next for you? Why did you come to post-secondary education? I wish I could bottle up those 5,000 comments. because it creates the conditions of why we do what we do.
Right.
It's changing people's lives. And we talked earlier about strengths and weaknesses. That makes me strong. That gets me fired up.
Now that recharges your battery,
It
right? That's just
recharges my battery.
your battery is recharging in the moment, right?
Exactly.
You're charging my battery right now in this
Oh,
conversation.
Thanks,
I'm not kidding
Jerry.
you.
Yeah. No, it's a powerful, and it goes back to the power of education, the
Yeah.
power of learning. The average age of our student is about 26 or 28 years old. Individuals who come to us with life, a mortgage payment, aging parents, having to work, and then having to fit into that model a learning opportunity. They're very, very inspirational. Yeah.
Wow.
If someone was wondering about going to NSCC,
Yes.
what would you tell them?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is do it. It's going to change your life. And then I would also say that it's okay if in the past, perhaps your educational experience may not have been a great one.
Yeah.
No one's fault.
Yeah.
It's just that it wasn't the right time for learning. And I would assure them that there's a soft landing before them. The number of people that we have working with us who are very, very comfortable and love working with people to try to help them map out what's the right path for you, which may be the very different path for you. We don't believe that one size fits all. We believe that one size fits one. And that's a very, very special kind of paradigm for learning. So come, take the opportunity to have someone sit down with you and kind of work to figure out what's the right path for you. Great statement in post-secondary education. You have to meet potential students where they are.
Yeah.
Meet them where they are. Meet them where they are. We have a cool program called Test Drive. You can call us up and test drive a program for a day. You arrive in the morning, a senior student will take you under their wing, and they'll take you through the entire day of the life of a nursing student or an
That's great.
engineering student. So I would say, come test drive a program.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Don, you describe NSCC as sort of a young adult now.
Yes.
28,
We're about 27, 28 years old.
27,
Yeah.
28 years old.
Yeah.
You would have been one of the parents for half the young adult's life.
That's right.
Right? So,
Yeah.
But there's a whole bunch of people there co-parenting with you, and that is you've got a big team around
Yes.
you, right?
Yes.
The NSCC's big team, a lot of people leaning in to do that. Tell me about what the team means to you.
Yeah, so I love that whole notion of the team coming together. We have approximately 2,000 staff. And it's my belief it takes 2,000 people to graduate one student. And with that in mind, at the end of the day, I don't care what your business card says, at the heart of what you're doing, you're an educator.
Yeah.
And if you see a student who needs that kind of intervention, whether it's a Friday night at 9 o'clock and you are part of our maintenance team, and you see a student tearing up in a hallway because the computer just crashed, you stop and you take a minute to have a conversation with that person. Well, I got to tell you, I need not tell anyone to do that because people do it naturally. And one of the things that I loved about this institution, for which I deserve no credit, is that our whole internal learning, our kind of our PD mindset, is that regardless of your title, you're going to learn about adult learning principles. You're going to learn about what it means to be a modern college, so you can be, in that moment, the right kind of resource for that person. It also means for me is that when you have a passion, like we're talking about today, to see that spark in people's eyes of when they actually make that transition from maybe low confidence, not sure what's next for me, to kind of demystifying that. There are 2,000 people that come to work every day who absolutely love doing that. Again, that's their strength.
Wow.
And I'll finish off by saying, I mentioned convocation earlier. What's most powerful for me is when I see students get their credential and they begin and go off and hug their faculty. They hug people who've been part of their journey for them. It's that connection that we talk about. That's pretty special. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. Don, Nova Scotia is, it's driving on all cylinders, whether it's fisheries, whether it's agriculture, whether it's in the energy sector, renewable and otherwise. You've got a great ocean sector over there, great tech sector, a lot of good things happening. And quite honestly, it is successful because you've got a beautiful collaboration between government, industry, and academia, all people working together. Talk to me about your vision of where NSCC fits into that ecosystem.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm very proud of is in our name, the Nova Scotia Community College. 96% of the population of Nova Scotia lives within a half an hour's drive of an access point to the Nova Scotia Community College. Wow. So my dream, my vision is that we actually underline and highlight and embolden that word community. We want to be part of the community framework, the community mosaic of what it means to be a social asset in today's world. So when people look at NSCC, it's more than just an institution of higher learning. It's a beacon, and it's a beacon of hope, quite frankly. So our vision is that we are integrated with, we're part of community, and we're seen to be that community resource where people just naturally say, yes, of course I'm going to go to NSCC to find out what's next for me in life. Of course I'm going to go to NSCC to help me figure out what my career choice is. Excuse me. So that's our vision, to really become not a good community college, but a great community college. And I believe that communities are just stronger because of that. So how do you become a great community college? I think the things we talked about earlier, recognizing there's a certain economic trajectory for Nova Scotia, as for Atlantic Canada, one from a social point of view, but it goes back to our DNA where we fundamentally believe everybody has a right to an education that will help prepare them for a better life. So the topics of equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, anti-racism, that's something that we're just doubling down on right now to make sure that people find a place that's safe, that's welcoming, and that's going to make them be that contributing person and human being to our economy.
That's not easy. There's a lot of tension around those concepts right now.
Jerry, there is a lot of tension, and in many ways, the way that the world is kind of feeling right now, that's going to get harder before it gets easier.
Yeah.
You know, there's a great statement or a great myth in leadership where you say, you deal with hard now for easy later. I actually think you deal with hard now to deal with harder later. Hard now helps prepare for harder later. And this is going to be difficult. I don't think it's going to get, I said it's going to get harder. I don't think it's ever going to get easier. But it doesn't mean we can't stand down from that. And that's where the importance of leadership. Like, we need to be seen as leaders in the community for something that we believe in.
And leaders at all levels, right?
At all level.
At all level, right?
Yeah. I don't care about your position.
Yeah.
Positional leadership means nothing to me. Situational leadership means everything to me.
And with 2,000 people and 5,000 students every year, you must see incredible examples of leadership every single day.
We do. And the 5,000 are ones that we graduate. Like, we have 25,000 students who are learning with us at any one time.
Yeah.
But the ones that are at the end of the program is around 5. So this notion of leadership, I just can't stress the importance of, and for me, like an entrepreneur, there's no single definition of a leader. Again, it's like the entrepreneurship journey. Leadership has to come from within. The most inspiring leaders that we know in the world have a strong sense of self. They know what they believe in, and they don't motivate people. They inspire people. There's a big difference between motivation and inspiration. Motivation is fear-based. Here's your budget. You better hit it. If you don't, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Motivation. Inspiration comes from a person having a clear vision, having the ability to bring people along with that vision. Inspiration comes from leaders who are able to be vulnerable. We used that word earlier.
Yeah.
Who can surround themselves with people who are smarter than they are. And by God, they can admit it when they've made a mistake.
Yeah.
that's an inspirational individual as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and you're so right. I mean, and showing people sort of where they fit into the journey and the vision, and
Right.
that's all good, solid leadership. And inspiring somebody is very much different. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You know, it's exciting. I loved hearing about your foundation and how you kind of grew up and the cool things that you're doing right now. This is all very important stuff. What's on the horizon? What's next for you personally, professionally? What's exciting?
So, you know, a few years ago I was having a bit of a dip in my career, and I talked to one of my mentors, and he said, let me ask you a couple questions. He said, are you reaching all your financial targets at work? Yep, check. How about your enrollment targets? Yep, check. And how about this target and this target? I was just check, 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 check. And he said, well, that's your problem. I said, what do you mean that's my problem? He said, you're too goal-orientated. You're not growth-orientated. So as I look at myself now, my professional career, I got to continue to grow and develop. And I've moved. There's a great book called Road to Character. And there was a time in my life that I was focused on what the author calls resume virtues. What's next that I can put on my resume? And he says there's a point in your life where you become more focused on eulogy virtues. Bit of a dark topic.
Yeah.
But you think about it,
Yeah.
I don't care what, they're not going to be talking about my resume, they're going to be talking about what impact I've had on the world.
Right.
How have I changed someone's life? So to be honest with you, I'm thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about where can I make the biggest impact in an area for which I have great love. And it's going to be in the world of education. That's my zone. So I'm very happy at looking at where NSCC is going to go for our next generation. We need to grow. We need to become more inclusive. We need to diversify our programming. We need to improve our collaboration. Those are things that will keep me growing for a long, long time. And then after that, I think I'm going to hop on my motorcycle and drive across Canada.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. That's something you've always wanted to do?
I never spend a kilometer on a major highway. It's going to be all back roads from coast to coast. I'm going to start right here in St. John's and go right over to Victoria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just sort of get into those back roads and meet people.
In the back road, on a motorcycle, you're able to drive and you smell and you hear and you see things you don't see in a car. And because of that, you become almost one with this word community that I have such a passion for. I want to see the amazing communities in this country. Look, I'm proud to be a Nova Scotian. I'm proud to be an Atlantic Canadian, but by God, I'm proud to be a Canadian.
Yeah.
And I think Canada has an amazing place in this world right now to stand up and show leadership. We have, but we have more opportunities to do that.
Yeah. A lot of people say the world needs more Canada. It's often been said for sure. And you're so right. I love that whole concept of driving across Canada on a motorcycle. It sort of reminds me of, you know, the great rock drummer Neil Peart that did exactly that, right?
Yeah,
I've read his book. It's a great book.
And it was that. He didn't do it for the adventure. He did it because it was very therapeutic for him, right?
Yeah. It was a sense of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I can't think of a better form of transportation to feel connected with the environment that you're going through than a motorcycle. Yeah.
It's interesting, you know, when you think about that, the connection to Atlantic Canada and the fact that location doesn't matter that much in work life.
Right.
You know, I mean, you look at this beautiful view we have behind us.
Yes.
I remember a story where a gentleman was sitting next to me in a restaurant and he had a very large business and a guy from Montreal was trying to convince him to move to Montreal. And he was right next to me and you know what his response was? Why would I move to Montreal?
Why?
My employees, he said, are sitting, doing their creative work, looking out the window and seeing whales jump.
Yes.
So I get your motorcycle trip, I get it, and I get the fact that Nova Scotia Community College is connected to the community. I feel connected to the community just listening to you talk, you know. But it's so important what you're doing.
Yeah.
Positivity is important, isn't it?
It is, and you know, we are so fortunate to have I talked about the fourth industrial revolution and the importance of, and what you're doing here with using technology to connect people. It's so important. But we also can never forget, you know, during COVID, they talked about socially distancing by 3 meters, but we've been socially distancing for 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you have 1,000 friends on Facebook, but not one friend you can call in a time of hardship. So that sense of community, that sense of coming together and creating that social fitness is as important as physical fitness, I think, nowadays. Yeah.
You know, you have clearly been inspired by people, your mentors. You use that word a lot in the conversation, that you name them by name. And there's little doubt that this conversation will inspire other people. And in fact, there's little doubt in my mind that you are inspiring people every day, whether you realize it or not, just by your vision of where you're taking the community college at the moment. We often ask our guests to leave the audience with a piece of advice. That's a big ask.
Wow.
But, you know, you've been around the block. You've done some things. You've had deviations in your career, and you found what I would argue is a sweet spot for yourself.
Yeah.
What would a piece of advice look like?
Boy, that's a great question. I would say always ensure that you live your life with one hand in the soil and one hand in the stars. Have that ability to be grounded and rooted in what's important in terms of your community and your family and your life. That's the hand in the soil. And have one hand in the stars in terms of always having that next kind of adventure, what's around the corner, that magnetic pull, and don't lose the importance of that. One hand in the soil, one hand in the stars.
Jerry, your thoughts?
Well, you know, Alan, you've asked that question to virtually every single one of our guests. That is probably the best visual that I've ever heard anyone say. And we've done well over 1,000 interviews. I sit, and it's, you know what I love about the platform that this is, Don? You and I have known each other for 25 years, socially. We never really got into the kind of conversation that we have here today.
That's right.
And I think it's a sense of beauty that you have about this country that has really made an impression on me today. And I didn't really know that about you beforehand, you know. So for that reason, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. With 2,000 employees and 5,000 graduates, there's a lot on your plate. Thank you for taking time for Gale Force Wins.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure.
Don, again, thank you very much. A wonderful conversation. Love your vision. Love where you come from. Love how you're grounded. And I love the direction that you wish to go. I wish you much success. And I will tell you this, that not only does the world need more Canada, but the world needs more Don Bureaux. So thank you very much.
That's a great, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you for the two of you. We talk about the importance of creating even a micro community to take the time to have conversation. So thank you for helping people have conversation. Thank you, sir. All the best.
Excellent.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.